Okay, we've got our data in place and I'm ready to start pulling images into my XNAT so that we can enable some containers. The first thing that you have to do is log in as an admin user. Doesn't have to be named admin, but you need to have a user account with administrative permissions so that you can get access to this administer menu. Site admins are the only ones that can do things on the site-wide level like this, like installing images, enabling site-wide commands, managing your container service settings and all of that. Project owners do have some control of the elements that you load or that you enable once you've once you've imported them, but yeah, this initial setup has to be done by a site admin. So the first thing you do is go to Administer, Plugin Settings, and depending on your plugin that you have installed, container service may or may not bubble up to the top here, but what you're looking for are your container service setup here. You can see we've got our connection to the local Docker socket, and we've got our Docker hub URL defined. Everything's okay. And we're going to go to our images. So when you first come to your XNAT, there are no preloaded images. That's actually not something that we can ship with an XNAT. Otherwise, that would have been cool to provide for you. But what we can do is add an image here. You click Add New Image. And then let's start with something simple. We're going to do the DICOM to Nifty container image. And we're going to get the latest. And if you want, we can see over here so this is how this image looks on Docker Hub. There's not a lot of information here. We could add some metadata to the image, but you can see that numerous versions have been uploaded. And the latest is the one that we want. So yay, our image has now been downloaded, and you can see that there's already a command that's been enabled on this. This is again an XNAT enabled container image. And we can actually look at the command JSON. We don't want to edit it at this point, but you can see there's quite a lot of detail here. This is our command line, and you can see there are placeholders here, bids, other options. Those track with the inputs that are specified here. So we have an input named bids, and this is going to be a true-false setting in the UI. And this replacement key bids gets replaced if the setting is true with this -B command line flag. And again, we have other options here, and this is kind of a wild card, so we aren't specifying a lot. What we just say is command line flag or replacement key other options, and we'll substitute that in with whatever the user types. Let's close out of that. And you can see here command configurations, fairly simple. We have the ability to run this process on a scan, and that is reference to this container, and it is enabled. And one of the interesting things we can do, we can set defaults. So we can say where would you find, for example, we're looking at the inputs here. It expects to find scans, and when we say scan, we actually mean the DICOM resource, the DICOM scan resource. And there's a separate input here for scan DICOMs. That's the actual file, and the files need to be labeled DICOM. You can see this column here says user settable. That means should the user be able to change these options in the UI, and we do not want them to change that. Let's say we have this bids option here, and that the default value is false. We could also make this true as a default, so that your site-wide executions of the DICOM to Nifty will automatically output to bids format. And let's go to our project here, and TCIA COVID lung. And you can see here, projects also have to individually decide whether to enable these commands or not. And they can decide individually what those defaults should be. So the projects automatically inherit site-wide defaults. But let's say in this project we don't want to output to bids. We just don't care about that in the context of this project, so we're going to leave that false. And in fact, we can just set that user settable option to be off. So we don't really need the user to make any inputs. They'll run things exactly the way that we want them to run them. Okay, let's pull our second image. And this is the lung mask image, which I'll show here. So there's our Docker pull command, XNAT/lung mask, add new image, version tag. I think we want latest. Let's make sure. Yes, we want latest. And this is a large image. It will take a while for it to download. And in fact, you may see a download timeout error because at this point, XNAT is waiting for a response from the Docker Hub to say download complete. But your request might time out before you get to that point. As an alternative, you could pull this image locally. So log into your Docker server directly and pull the image there, and then tell XNAT that the image is installed once it's installed, because that way you avoid the HTTP request timeouts. Okay, so after a few more minutes, our second lung mask command or image did load. And we can see there's actually two commands that come with this one, but I know as a fact that the DICOM to lung mask one is dodgy. So when we go to the command configurations tab, we're going to disable this one site-wide. We don't want any project using that one. We want people using the nifty to lung mask. And so if we go then, let's see if you see how this appears in a project. If you go to your project settings, you can see that DICOM to lung mask appears, but it is permanently disabled as far as the project is concerned. They can't toggle it on or off. So there we go. We've got nifty to lung mask enabled, and we're ready for the next step in our demo.